Well, great job, Brother Gary and choir. It is good to see you this morning. Second Baptist, thank you so much for being so kind to my family. Brother Jim, thank you so much for having me back today. We are honored to be here. We were talking on the way down. This almost feels like our home church. I hope that's okay. And we're just proud to be part of you. We really, really are. Brother Gary choir, great job all morning in worship. I will say I miss Dawson. I miss the mayor. I wish he were here and could see him. But it's so good to see you. I know Brother Jim and I talked this week, and he said, I didn't know it was Time Change Sunday, and that's okay. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you lost an hour's sleep tonight and last night and came on to church this morning. And one of the lowest attended Sundays of the year is this Sunday, as a matter of fact. And so high-five your neighbor and said, I'm glad you're here this morning. You did well. You did well. So good to be here. I know we're on a time crunch, a lot I want to say. I know we're on a time crunch this morning. I'm preaching tonight, and so come back tonight. We'll get here a little early, and we'll hang out and chit-chat some if you're here. But Second Baptist, we love you. We're honored to be back today. Luke chapter 23. Luke chapter 23. About the only thing that has changed with us is about a year ago, I woke up and could not read anymore. I had went blind overnight almost. And so I hate putting on these glasses, but I'm going to have to because I can't read if I don't. And so Luke chapter 23. Stand with me, if you will, as we honor God's word by reading it. Let me tell you a little bit about the state of Southern Baptist life. 75% of our churches in the Southern Baptist Convention are plateaued or declining. I'm going to tell you some more numbers tonight. I'm going to talk about evangelism a little bit tonight, so I really would ask you, please come back tonight just to hear that. But when I go around the nation now and I speak in churches really all over the nation, and here's what I hear from pastors a lot. Brother Jim, your pastor has not said this to me, so let me excuse him from this, but I hear this all the time. I was talking to a pastor about his church and what's going on. He'll say something almost inevitably like this. He'll say, preacher, I think here's the problem. He'll say, about half my church is not saved, I don't think. Now, before you get upset at a pastor for telling me something listen to this. An overwhelming majority of Southern Baptists stumble on the question, is Jesus the only way to heaven? Now, listen, we get the answer right in church. But if you look at a Southern Baptist in the eye and you say, will a sincere, kind-hearted, loving grandfather Jewish person go to hell? We stutter. But the Bible is very, very plain on the answer to that question. It gives us a mandate for what we are left here in this world to do as believers. But I think part of the reason that we stumble on the question is there is a point of self-conviction in our own hearts about the question. But not all church members are truly born again. We figured out a system to join the church. We figured out the vernacular. We know when to stand and when to sit and when to sing and when not to sing and when to talk and when not to talk. And we have learned the rhythm of a church without ever knowing the Redeemer of the church. So I just want to talk about that this morning. Luke chapter 23. Look with me, if you will, beginning in verse number 39. Then one of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, if you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, do you not fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due rewards of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, assuredly I say unto you, today you will be with me in paradise. Thank you. You may be seated. I want to preach this morning on the facts of the afterlife. We are talking about accepting the facts about eternity. I want to borrow a line from a politician and remind you that you are entitled to your own opinion on anything, but you are not entitled to your own facts on anything. Unique among all the books ever written, the Bible accurately foretells specific events in details many years, sometimes centuries before they occur. As a matter of fact, in the Bible you hold in your hand, there are about 2,500 prophecies in the pages of the Bible, about 2,000 of which have already been fulfilled to the letter, with no errors, about 500 more waiting to go. The scientists tell us the odds for all of these prophecies having been fulfilled by chance without error is less than 1 in 10 with 2,000 zeros after it. I don't have any idea what 10 with 2,000 zeros is after it, but I know it's a big number. The writings of Buddha, Confucius, Muhammad, or Joseph Smith contain not one successfully fulfilled prophecy. So here's what I'm going to say to you. When this Bible you hold in your hand speaks about life and eternity, it is 100% reliable. So here are the facts. Fact number one, there is life after death, and it lasts for eternity. Fact number two is all people are going to one or two places. There is no middle ground. The Bible doesn't talk about a middle ground. All of humanity is going to one of two places. They are going to heaven or they are going to hell. That's a fact. Fact number three is good people do not go to heaven. And fact number four is bad people do not go to hell. The truth of the gospel is that saved people go to heaven and unsaved people die and go to hell. The enemy does not want those thoughts in your mind. The enemy, the world we live in, just wants you to be spiritual. We were just had the television on this week, and we just kind of my wife and I were in the den, but we weren't watching it. It was just on. We didn't know what channel it was on, and there was some crazy person on there, some lady talking about the power of angels, and I think it was Dr. Oz or something, and she was talking about all the angels, and it was just people. I mean, it was. Anybody see that this week? Because, I mean, it only got my attention about halfway through. It was the most ridiculous spiritual speak that will condemn people to an eternity without Christ I have ever heard. And they were looking at her like, wow, this is awesome. Because that is the world that that is the spiritualness our world wants us to have. They don't mind. The enemy does not mind if you are spiritual. They just don't want you to be conclusive about anything. As a matter of fact, they want you to live in a spiritual cloud. The enemy wants you to have all kinds of spiritual language and all kinds of spiritual talk. And the truth is, our world feels like we're okay as long as we're hanging out somewhere in the spiritual cloud with spiritual talk. But the fact is, you are not okay being spiritual. The fact is, being spiritual does not get you one step closer to heaven. The fact is, being spiritual means you are lost. The enemy says, just invent your own way to heaven, you'll be fine. The enemy says, I read a quote by Warren Buffett this week, where he said, the fact is, there are many ways to heaven. This is just one good way to get there. And the one good way was, he was talking about how much money he had donated to charity. The enemy says it's okay to invent your own way. All roads lead to heaven. I want to be honest with you. There does not take a collegiate class in logic for you to understand all roads cannot lead to heaven. Because there are some roads that you would disagree with and others would disagree with your road. It is not your opinion. It is not my opinion. It is what the Bible says. And the Bible says that you cannot invent your own way to heaven. And that dawned on this thief on the cross. As this thief was hung on the cross, everything he might have thought was true was suddenly stripped away. And here on the cross, he realized Jesus was the only way. And that's what the point I want to make today is, I want you to come and forget about whether you're a guest, whether you're a senior citizen, whether you're a teenager, whether you're a church member, whether you're not. I want you to lay all of those labels aside and say, Jesus is the only way. What's it going to take for that to happen? Let me make three statements. Number one, in order for you to trust Jesus this morning, you must accept the fact that where you will spend eternity is the most important decision in this moment, this morning, right now. See, there was something about being nailed to a cross that immediately reordered the priorities of this thief. No longer were his priorities moving up the ladder at work, accumulating material possession or wealth, or no longer were his priorities about anything in this world. Suddenly this thief has realized that the only thing that mattered in the world were where he was going to be 10 seconds after his heart quit beating, 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 years, 10 millennial after his heart quit beating. That was the only question that mattered. Listen to me carefully. You should not wait until you are about dead before eternity becomes the most important thing in your life. Your plan should not be to wait until your next to last heartbeat to take care of eternity. You've got to realize that every single one of us in this building, we are going to die. We're going to take our final breath. We're going to launch into eternity. We're going to stand before God. We're going to heaven or we're going to hell. And it's not the preacher that makes that call. It is God Almighty who makes that call. I'm afraid the reason that you're here today and you may not be saved is that you have eternity pushed way back in the back of your mind somewhere where you don't like to think about it. When the thought comes to you, you find a way to dismiss it as quickly as what you can. I want to bring it back to the forefront this morning and let you understand you must realize that eternity for you is just one heartbeat away. And now, this moment, is the time to get ready. A theologian named Frederick Buckner said it, intellectually we all know that we will die, but we do not really know it in the sense that the knowledge becomes a part of us. We do not really know it in the sense as though a sense of living as though it were true. On the contrary, we tend to live as though our lives would go on forever. The other problem we have with eternity is that everyone plans on taking care of eternity eventually. Right? I rarely meet Pastor Jim, anyone who says, I'm just going to die and go to hell. That's just my plan. If you go out and you witness to people, here's what they say. Well, I plan on taking care of eternity eventually. I literally had a man tell me one day when I was trying to lead him to Christ, he said, well, preacher, I want to get saved one day. I just have more sinning I'd like to do before I got saved. Well, I appreciated the honesty at least. At least I know where he stood. And, it's like I got one good trip to Vegas left in me, preacher, and then after that, I'm going to get saved. Well, the problem with that is that eventually never really seems to get there. It's like my kids were small. Someone suggested to me we should start a college fund when they were like kids. And I was like, hey, it's a great idea. I'm going to do that one day. And so they were 1, 5, 10, 15. You know what the college fund is now? Mom and Dad to work as hard as we possibly can to pay for college. That's the college fund now. I'm the college fund. See, I planned on doing it one day. It just never came around. One of those, where your soul is going to spend eternity is not one of those things you can schedule on your calendar like a birthday party because you never know. And so many people plan on making things right with God and their soul before they die. But there's two problems with that. One is you die before you plan to. And two, your heart becomes too hard from the years of putting off Jesus. Why would we put off eternity? I've never met a bride who was going to get married on Saturday and on Friday woke up and said to her mother, you know what, we're getting married tomorrow. Maybe we ought to think about a dress, and a church, and a preacher, and could we get some food there, and maybe we could get a flower or two. You know what, most girls I know, the wedding's been planned for years. They're just waiting for a guy to plug into the ceremony. Why? Because it's an important date for her. When we first moved in the Atlanta area, we started driving around the town, and I started seeing these bumper stickers on the back of cars, and it said 26.2. And I had no idea what that meant. I thought it was a radio station. But come to find out, there is no 26.2 on the radio dial, AM, FM, Sirius, or whatever. There's no 26.2. So I tried to figure out what it was, and I drove around. I see them all over the place, and I couldn't figure out what it was. So I finally determined it's a cult. And the 26.2 is like the insignia of the cult. So when a 26.2 would drive by me, I'd stop and pray for him. Dear Lord, there's one of those guys in the cult. I don't know, God, what that is, but I know it can't be good. And so I just pray you'd redeem them from the cult. Then one day a car drove by me and had a 13.1 sticker on it. And I figured that was a junior inductee and he was not all the way in yet. So I stopped and I prayed, dear Lord Jesus, there's a 13.1. He's not in all the way. Surely you can save him before he gets in all the way. Man, it was a few months later, like a 52.4 drove by me. I pulled over. I said, dear God, the grand poobah has just driven by me. He's the leader of them all, Lord Jesus. Save him, save him. And so I was in the car one day with Savannah, and 26.2 drove by. It's just a regular member, wasn't a junior, wasn't a grand poobah, just a regular guy. And I said, Savannah, we need to stop and have prayer for that cult. And she said, you have lost your mind. What is wrong with you? And I said, what? And she said, that's not a cult. That is how far a marathon is. That means they've ran a marathon. I've since to find out it actually is a cult, is what I found out since then. Man, I'm from North Georgia. We don't run unless something's chasing us up in North Georgia, or we're chasing something. And so she told me it was a marathon. Since then, I've got people, friends, even some of you, you've done marathons and half marathons and marathons and a half and all that. And so you love to run. Here's what I know about a runner. I've never met a runner who on Friday was drinking a 2-liter Coke, eating a bag of Doritos, saying, I'm going to run a race tomorrow. No, what I know is before that guy runs the race, he prepares for it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks ahead of time. He's getting ready to run the race. Now you say, preacher, there's nobody that's going to run a marathon that on Friday is going to be eating a bag of Doritos and drinking a 2-liter Coke. No, why? Because it's too important of an event. That's right. But if those are that important, isn't eternity so much more important? Why do we put getting ready for eternity off? You don't know where you may be tomorrow. You don't have the promise of another heartbeat. You may harden your heart for the last time. This could be the last sermon you hear. Listen to me. If you hear one statement, hear this one. Hell is full of people who planned on getting saved one day. But they didn't make their eternal soul the most important thing in their lives. So let me personalize it for you today. Where are you on this issue of eternity? It's not enough to have your parents, your family, your husband, your wife, or your preacher, the deacon, or the Sunday school teacher fooled. Are you going to stay in your pew and push eternity in the back of your mind once again? Let me ask you a question. If your house caught on fire, would you stop and balance the checkbook on the way out? If your house caught on fire, ladies, would you worry about the dirt that's behind the refrigerator? We don't have any dirt behind our refrigerator, but I know some of you probably do. And let me ask you a question. If your house was on fire, would you jump through the flames and tell your wife, hey, I'm going to go crank the mower and I'm going to mow the lawn real quick before the fire department gets here? No. You would make sure that you and your family were out of the house safely. Why don't you do that with eternity? Quit goofing off with all the things that don't matter, all the rhythms of the church, all the routines of the church, and take care of the matter at hand. Mark 8 says this, what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and lose his own soul? The answer is absolutely nothing. And so if you would be saved today, where you will spend eternity will have to come front and center of your life. Make a second statement, and that is this. Not only if you would like to be saved, you must accept the fact that where you'll spend eternity is the most important decision of the moment, but you have to accept the fact, number 2, that you are helpless and cannot save yourself. Brother Gary said it so well before that last song. He was talking, I thought, go, Brother Gary, that's my sermon. What was it you think that had this thief turned to Christ when he was hanging on the cross? Well, let me ask you a question. What else was he going to do? Where else was he going to turn? Who else was he going to turn to? Look at the condition he's in. He's been convicted of a crime worthy of capital punishment. He has been beaten and nailed to a cross and left to die. His freedom rights arguments have all been taken away. He can count the time he has left on earth in hours, not days or years. And suddenly where he's going to spend eternity is on his mind. And here's the truth that dawns on this man. There is not a thing he can do about where he's going to spend eternity. It may be on his mind, but he is hanging on a cross dying, and there is nothing that he can do to change his pitiful condition. If going to heaven requires a good deed, he cannot do the good deed. If going to heaven requires a holy life, he is far too late. If going to heaven requires going to church, he is out of luck. If going to heaven requires a financial gift, he has nothing to give. If going to heaven requires confession to a priest, there is none to be found. If going to heaven requires a sacrifice, his time is up. This thief got to the place in life when his soul got on his mind. The first thing he realized is that he was lost and there wasn't a thing he could do to personally change his lost condition. So hear me, church. You will never be saved as long as you think you can do something to help yourself get saved. The church is full of people who think I can get to heaven almost on my own. I just need a little help from God. Listen to me. You have absolutely no chance apart from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Your righteousness, the Bible plainly says, is as filthy rags. Those who go to heaven are those who come face to face with the reality that they are completely helpless as far as heaven goes. You are helpless. You are hopeless. You are not good enough. You cannot get good enough. You cannot find your own way. You cannot contribute to your own salvation. You cannot turn over a new leaf until you get to the place that you realize your helplessness will never save you. You will not get to heaven until you realize your helplessness will never, ever save you. Listen, you will never, ever move on to the real solution for salvation. I think I told you this, but my kids hate it when I say this, so they're here, so I'm going to say it. We don't get to go to church, all four of us, very much. We're members at 3 different churches, and I'm doing 2 different churches now, and I'm doing an interim, so we go to 3 different churches on Sunday. And so I was a fairly smart kid in high school. As a matter of fact, I was captain of the chess team. I think I've told you that, but my kids hate to hear it. And so I just want to say it again. And when I was in high school, 4.0, I did get the geometry award, and I did receive the algebra 2 award my sophomore and junior year in high school. So you say, well, what does that mean? It means that I've bragged about it for the last 25 years. That's what it means. So it never really needed all that, but my kids would be in school and they'd be like, oh man, I'm taking geometry this year. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to brag, but Mom, get that certificate out, Mom. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I got the geometry award in 10th grade. They'd get an algebra, and they'd be like, well, I'm in algebra. And I'm like, I didn't get the algebra award. I didn't think it was fair to get all the awards. And so I let some of the other kids have them, but I did get the Algebra 2 award, and we'll hang it up if you need to. And like, no, Dad, we know you're smart. You got the Geometry award. And so I just remind them all the time, captain of the chess team, Geometry award, Algebra 2 award, 4.0, all that. But nobody ever really made me show them my diploma or made me prove my geometry or Algebra 2 skills. Till one day, Michaela was about 10th grade. Sherry called me at the church, or maybe she was younger than that. Sherry called me at the church and said, hey, Michaela needs help with algebra homework, freshman year. Michaela needs help with algebra homework when you get home. Algebra, not Algebra 2, algebra. And I said, 2x equals 4, x equals 2. I got it. I said, hey, I'll help her. She said, no, Joe, she's having a hard time. You're going to have to help her. And I said, I got it, baby, I got it. So I got off work, and she was there in the table in the kitchen, and she had all this stuff laid out, and she said, Dad, I really need help with my algebra homework. And I said, baby, I don't know if I told you this or not, but I got the Algebra 2 award when I was in high school. And she said, I know, Dad. And so Sherry said, you're going to have to help her. I got some things to do, but you're going to have to help her. And I said, baby, I don't know. Maybe I need to pull the certificate out, but I just want to remind you, I did get the Algebra 2 award. This is just Algebra 1. This is baby stuff. And so she said, okay, well, help her. And so Michaela took her book, and she laid out, and she said, I have to answer all the problems on the right-hand side of the page. So I got the book out, and I looked at it, and I said, really? Is, on this side? And she said, yeah, on that side. And I said, you know, when I was in high school, the answer to the odd problems were in the back of the book. Did anybody ever have the answer to the odd problems in the back of the book? And I said, I don't need the answers, but I just want to check my work. I've done it in my head, and I want to check my work. And they've changed math books. Her math book did not have the answers in the back. Now listen, do not assume that the reason I got those 2 awards was because the answer to the odd problems were in the back. That is totally coincidental. But hers weren't in the back, and so we'd been at the table for 20 minutes or more, and I said, now, I tell you what, baby, you have other homework? She said, I do. And I said, well, why don't you go do the other homework, and Dad's going to read a little bit over here in the other book, in this page, because this is algebra. I want to remind you, I got the Algebra 2 award, and so I'm going to read over here a little bit, and I'll come back, and I don't know what to do. She said, okay. I flipped to like page 1, and I just started speed reading as fast as I could. I got back over to this problem, and I did not know the answer. I did not even, listen, it was so bad, I did not only not know the answer, I did not know the question either. I couldn't understand it. So I went to that place. When you don't know the answers in life, man, you can go to that place and find every answer you know in life. Anybody know where that is? Google, that's right. See, some spiritual churches, Jesus juke me and say Jesus. That's not the right answer. It's Google. And so I went to Google. I could not. Now, you may not know this, but you can go into Google and you can type a math problem and it will give you the answer, boys and girls. But I couldn't figure out how to type the problem correctly in Google. They have changed algebra since I was in algebra 20 some odd years ago. I finally, it'd been an hour, Michaela wandered back into the kitchen and Michaela said, how are we? And I said, Michaela, I'll tell you, baby, this is bad to say, I can't figure this out. And she said, well, you have to. I said, I know you need help, but Dad, I said, I know, baby, but listen to what I'm trying to say. I do not understand. She said, yeah, but you got the Algebra 2 award when you were in high school. I said, I know, baby, but that was a long time ago, and they've changed it. We used like an abacus back then, you know, and now you have like calculators. I don't understand all this, and it's just complicated. She said, well, you have to help me. Mom said you were going to help me. Mom! Sherry came in the kitchen. What is it, Michaela? Dad won't help me with my homework. I said, baby, I am trying to help you with homework. It's not that I can't help you, and I don't understand. And Sherry said, well, Joel, you did get the Algebra 2 award when you were in high. I said, I know, but I just have forgotten. She said, well, if you got the Algebra 2 award, this is just like Algebra 1. Surely you can figure this out. And I said, I'll never bring it up again, but I do not understand what you're trying to do. I am not the solution to your problem. Michaela said, fine. I'll just call the homework helpline. I said, what? That is an hour and a half of my life I'm not going to get back, and you have a homework hotline? Yeah, there's a teacher on call at night, and we are supposed to call them if we don't know the answers. I said, well, why have you been fooling with me? She said, well, because you got the Algebra 2 award when you were in high school. Here was the truth of the matter. I was not going to get her onto someone who could help her as long as she was fooling around with someone who could not help. Listen to me, church. As long as you're playing around with what won't work, you'll never move on to what does work to be saved. See, as long as you've got your faith in the wrong answer, you will never put all your faith in the right answer. As long as you're thinking, well, I can live a really good life and surely God will let me in. No, He won't. I can come to church every Sunday and surely God will let me in. No, He won't. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do like Warren Buffett. I'm going to give a lot of money to the church. God will let me in. No, He will not. Until you take your faith out of what you think might could help you, you will never get saved. You are as helpless as the thief on the cross. You've got to quit thinking, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to try real hard. You've got to quit flirting with the idea that you're able to slide into heaven and quit trusting in all those things that'll never work. Doesn't matter if you're grandparents were church members, or your parents were, or your children are, your wife is, or your husband is. We don't stand before God in groups. We stand before God one-on-one. That leads me to the third thing we see about the thief on the cross. That is, if you're going to be saved, you have to accept the fact that Jesus is the only way to heaven. What a beautiful thing he did in this passage, Jesus. The thief is nailed to the cross. He's completely hopeless. He's a vile sinner and he knows it. And guess who he's nailed beside? Constantine outlawed crucifixions about 400 AD out of respect for Christ, but historians estimate somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 people were crucified during that time. This thief was one of thousands, and guess who he happens to be nailed next to? Jesus. You say, well, that was luck. No, that was the mercy of God. He looked around at Jesus and realizing I'm about to die, eternity is the only thing I care about, realizing he could not save himself, he looked at Jesus and he said this, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me when you get to heaven. And he cast all of his trust into Jesus. That thief realized if he was going to heaven, he could not save himself, and the only hope was nailed right beside him. Listen, church, when we realize that when we realize that our soul is going to spend eternity somewhere, it becomes the most dominant thought in our minds. We realize how helpless we are. Listen, you're not finished, because at that moment, a lot of people turn to something else. They turn to another religion, a new belief, some form of a spiritual journey they're going to go on. None of those will get you to heaven. It's not good enough just to realize you need to go to heaven. You've got to put your trust in the right person to get you to heaven. Our world is so confused. I looked up the other day the 5 fastest growing eccentric religions. There's the Prince Philip movement. There's an island that thinks Prince Philip is a god, and they worship him on a mountain. There's the John Frum movement. It's another island which holds American godlike esteem. The John Frum movement, which has been active since the 1930s, believes an American man named John Frum will bring wealth to those who follow them. There's realism, who was invented by a French race car driver. He believes we were created in an alien laboratory 25,000 years ago. And I read that and I thought, oh, give me a break. I was talking to a pastor in Southern California a couple months ago. We were talking about evangelism in his church, and I was going out there, and he said, well, look, we have a real problem. He said, you've never heard of it. It's something called realism out here. And I said, never heard of it. I use it as a sermon illustration. He said, man, it's real. We've got people out here, they believe that we're aliens. We were invented in an alien laboratory, and the earth's going to end in 2025. That's real. There are actual Americans, not that we're any smarter than anyone else, who believe that. One of the fastest growing religions overseas is Jediism. Star Wars? Star Wars? You're going to put your eternal hopes in Star Wars? Listen to this. Sincerity is always commendable, but it's damnable as a means to heaven. A lot of people are dosing themselves with everything that will not work, and they've never trusted the only thing that will, Jesus. And so we see it in the church. We see it outside the church. People medicate themselves with drugs and alcohol and hobbies and doing good and church activity. And you may find things that will give you momentary happiness or even momentary peace and excitement. But those things are just helping with the symptoms. The only cure for eternity is Jesus.